I'm John Viehe. Welcome to Chautauqua People. My guest today is Dr. John Dilley. He currently serves as chairman of the Chautauqua Property Owners Outdoor Lighting Committee, and he is a lifelong Chautauquan and a genuine rocket scientist with a career in the aerospace industry. John, please tell us about your cottage at Chautauqua.
Well, I'm very fortunate. My great-grandparents bought the cottage in 1926. And it's been the family ever since, so 90 years, and it's been a great place growing up. I've come to Chautauqua every summer since I was 3.
And how many generations have used the house?
We're on the 5th.
The 5th generation to use the house. Yep. Any plans to let it go?
Hopefully not. I'm keeping it going as long as I can, and it's going to be up to my kids at some point to keep it going even farther. So
that's right, and that's terrific, isn't it, then?
Yep.
And tell me about some of your experiences you had as a child here at Chautauqua.
Well, I started out, went to children's school, and I've still got some family pictures of me and my brother up on the stage in the amphitheater in our big boots when we were like 4 and 5, and went all through clubs, starting with Group 1 and through to SAC, and then was an apprentice counselor and then a junior counselor. And after that, I went and worked at the main dock for 5 summers, which was one of the best jobs I ever had.
Right. What did you do at the dock?
Well, we worked there. We pumped gas, rented boats, checked people in and out of slips, and actually one summer we taught water skiing. We gave water skiing lessons.
Really?
Yeah.
Really? And did you participate in the big shows they had with water skiing?
I did. I was, the Cars Lake Brothers had a water ski show, and I was in my first one. I was 10 years old.
Really?
The year I learned to water ski, I was in the water ski show. And actually, I skied every summer up until about 4 summers ago after I tore my Achilles.
Okay.
So broke my string then.
And then you decided, enough of this. And do you have a boat then that you can use for skiing these days?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
I've got a boat, and it's been in the water 20 years here.
Wonderful.
And when I bought it, they said, "You got to have a trailer." I said, "Why? It's always staying on Chautauqua Lake."
You bet. You bet. Now tell me what you did as a young adult when you were pumping gas during the day. Where were your hangouts during the evening?
Well, we tended to hit the bars around the lake.
Okay.
Starting with when I was 18, we went to Smokes, which is now the docks.
Right.
And then it seemed like every summer there was a different bar that was popular. It was Smokes, and then the Mar, then the Surf Club, then the place, what is it? The
Harbor? Snug Harbor.
Snug
Okay.
Harbor. Yep. So we made the rounds.
Okay. Now you're having all this great fun at Chautauqua during the summers. How did that fit with your academic background? Why don't you tell us where you went to school and what you studied?
Well, I was a townie at Ohio State. I went to Ohio State for 6 years, and I got 2 degrees, a bachelor's and a master's in aerospace engineering. And my boat dock job ended when I had to get a job-related job, and I became a research assistant at the newly built Aero Lab at Ohio State.
Right. And so you went on then, and you got 2 degrees from Ohio State.
Right.
Where else did you go to graduate school?
Well, I went to work for GE out of Ohio State outside of Philadelphia, and they had a advanced engineering course, which you took interdisciplinary engineering subjects, and then after you made it through that, there was an option to get a PhD, which was a competitive program, and I participated in that and competed, and they sent me to University of Pennsylvania to get a PhD in mechanical engineering, which was actually fluid flow and heat transfer. So I've got a PhD from Penn, got that in 1978.
Right. Now, you have the PhD, and I wonder if you could tell us some of the things you've done in industry that take advantage of this background.
Yeah, once I got my PhD, the jobs got better, the opportunities inside of General Electric. So I managed a group of like 20 science engineers, and then I went on to manage about a $25 million IR&D program which is independent research and development, which is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Then in the early 90s, I transferred from Philadelphia area down to the Washington area to GE had a contract to do system engineering for missile defense.
Right.
So I went to work down in the Washington area in Crystal City, and I did that for, let's see, 10 years, and then I got a job at Battelle Memorial Institute in Columbus, and I was doing similar stuff, missile defense marketing and project management.
Right.
But before I went to Battelle, one of the things I'm most proud of is I got involved with a virtual test tool for missile defense.
Mm-hmm.
And if you remember the movie War Games, where they had the screens with all these incoming ICBMs, well, the tests that they did looked a lot similar to that. And the first level of fidelity was everything was modeled. The incoming missiles, the detection, the tracking, the launching of the interceptors was all a computer model.
Mm-hmm.
But I got involved from the start. I was a charter member of it was called Theater Missile Defense System Exerciser, which was a virtual test tool which, instead of all simulated, the actual battle management, command and control hardware and software at the various service labs was used in the test. So it was called virtual because part of it was the real stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so the idea was to check the interoperability between the various systems, the Army systems, the Navy systems, to make sure they'd all work together when you did surveillance, detection and tracking, and then decide to launch an interceptor at the incoming enemy missiles.
Right.
That we basically could check that out without actually firing anything.
Right.
And the reason to up the fidelity was you could find more detailed problems. Also, the other reason was the big ICBM anti-missile tests would cost on the order of $100 million.
Right.
These virtual tests cost about $10 million, and the total models simulations would cost about $5 million.
Okay. So you could do a lot of those for the same.
And my job was system engineer. We basically laid out the requirements of what this tool should do, and then we followed up with a verification testing to make sure it was doing that, and validation testing to make sure it was doing the real thing like in the real world. So that was fairly. I spent on the order of 8-10 years doing that, and then did some more after I went to Battelle.
Right. And I assume that testing still continues today.
It is. Matter of fact, it's been so successful that in the last 5 years, and I got to go back and do some of that. Actually, I did 1 year after I retired. But they built a whole second set of this hardware. It was they had so much testing, they needed to build a whole new set, which was $10 to $20 million or more, just to duplicate the set they had.
Right. And is most of this testing then done continental United States?
Well, it started out that way, and it's I forgot to mention, it's on a classified network. It's encrypted. It uses like phone lines, T1 lines, or bigger, but it's encrypted at each end. So, but as it grew over time, we opened up to a lot of our allies, the Japanese, the Israelis. So some of this testing went international.
Right.
Not quite at the same security level.
Right.
A little bit lower, but it was still international testing.
Right. Like I share with you, I spent 5 years in Korea doing military intelligence work as an officer there, and indeed that problem set requires the very best defense missile thinking we have, and that clearly has to involve the Japanese and the Koreans, and so that makes very good sense. So you did that. Tell us a little bit about what happened at Battelle then.
Battelle is interesting. It's a not-for-profit. It's the world's largest independent R&D organization. So think of a large corporate lab, but not hooked to a corporation. It was founded by the Battelle family back in the late 20s. But it was an interesting place to work because it was more people-friendly. And they basically, took on a lot of jobs for, the good of mankind, if you will. But the work I did at Battelle was kind of a follow-on in some respects. I did some detailed threat analysis work and did some work going around looking at the virtual test sites. So it was interesting experience and great place to work.
Yeah, I remember driving by Battelle some years ago, a big red brick building on the campus at Ohio State.
Yeah, it's just across the street from the campus, yep.
And what I thought to myself, what a great place to put it at a flagship state university. And so that makes good sense. Now, when you worked for Battelle, was that your final major employer?
Yeah, I
Okay.
retired from Battelle in 2012.
And then what did you do?
Well, I came up to Chautauqua all summer. This is
Okay.
my 5th summer up at Chautauqua all summer, which is great. I haven't been able to do that since I was 21, so it was kind of a lifelong dream. And so the first summer I was up there, I got involved in the CLSC. I was offered the vice president position for the class of 2000, which is the largest CLSC class. So I'm still doing that. And then the next summer I got tapped to be a Chautauqua property owners area rep for Area 5,
Right.
which so I did that, and then at the end of that summer, Bill Netches tapped me for the outdoor lighting committee, and he's been either chairman or instrumental in that, pushing that forward since 2009.
Right.
So I joined the committee, and then when he moved up to be the president of the CPOA, I moved up to the chairman of the outdoor lighting committee.
Right.
And it's been really an amazing project, and the people in Chautauqua, the property owners and the visitors, are going to be really impressed and amazed, I think, at the new lights that have been selected over this process that's gone on for 7-8 years.
Right. Can you tell us sort of an assessment of the current lighting situation, why we need to do something?
Well, yeah, there's there's a whole list of reasons, and we can get in a little more detail later on. But the current lights are, number one, old. There's incandescent lights. They're in these metal pans that are. The technology is Thomas Edison technology, and he would be very proud that his technology has lasted since the 1880s until now. I mean, over 100 years, and but they're short-lived. They only last like 6 to 12 months. They're inefficient, and so those are the oldest ones. But there's also a lot of mercury vapor and high-pressure sodium that are not very efficient. But the biggest problem is that the current lights have a lot of glare, and so when we do the Sunday night walkabouts, we give a little lighting tour. Bill or I or some of the people on the committee every Sunday night during the season take people on a lighting tour that shows you the demo lights, which preceded the lights we picked. Actually, one of them's the lights we picked, and then we show them the older lights and some of the newer lights installed. But so then they get to see up close how glare, most of the lights that shine horizontally shine right in your eye, and it cuts down on the visibility of where you're actually going to walk.
So the glare itself is kind of a blinding phenomenon,
The glare blinds you to see where you're actually walking. And so they've done studies, and people found that if you cut down the glare, people can see the ground better where they're walking. And these new lights are very low glare. They basically have an LED up on top that shines off a reflector, so they come down in a conical area, and so very little light goes sideways. You can see them when you get up close to them, but when you're like more than 100 feet away or so, you don't see much light. It's all going down on the ground, and so you can see where you're going much better. And the big problem with the old lights is there's a lot of light trespass, and light trespass is basically when you have lights that shine every direction or sideways and down. It goes into people's bedrooms, and it's a big problem in Chautauqua because it goes into their bedrooms, and it's light you don't want there. So these new lights have low light trespass. They're also dark sky friendly. So the light is not wasted going up, and it's much easier to see the stars at night, and so you get rid of that light pollution problem. The old lights, very inefficient, especially the incandescent ones. So basically the new lights are so much more efficient, it's going to cut the energy cost of electricity by about a factor of 4, so about 25%.
So
it'd be a
only
big cost
one-fourth the
savings.
consumption, current consumption.
Yep. Which means that if prices rise for electrical rates, we're still going to pay less because we consume a quarter of the amount. So,
Right. Now, I understand you prepared a major report this spring about lighting. I wonder if you could tell me a little bit about that. Maybe we could see the title page, and then let's go through some key ones here.
yeah. So this is basically a summary of what we've done recently for CU. Actually, we're supporting both the Chautauqua Utility District, CUD, and the institution, but it's kind of totally different ways, and I'll explain that. But so this was a presentation that Bill Netches and I gave to CUD on Cinco de Mayo this year, so 5th of May. So this was about the new streetlights.
Okay. And let's take a look at the next panel, if we can, about lighting requirements at the institution.
Okay.
And you'll probably need to punctuate these points because of the fine print here.
Yeah. So this chart and the next one comes from, like the footnote says, that Naomi Miller is the DOE project manager for Gateway Projects. And so the first set of lights we want to put in, other than the onesies, twosies we already have put in, are the string on Pratt from Ames to Hearst. There's 10 lights, part of this DOE project. And so this was one of the charts in her presentation that I used for the CUD presentation. So the current old lights actually belong to National Grid. The institution pays to lease them and for them to maintain them. And so they're old incandescent and mercury vapor, which are obsolete. So the goal, when Bill set out, and he left me with a great committee, because his sister, Rita Coltai, is a full-time lighting consultant, and she did the lighting design for Stanford University. And also Naomi Miller, who put this presentation together, is one of our consultants, an unpaid consultant. She comes in through the DOE Gateway project.
Right.
Also on our committee, there's 2 retired gentlemen from GE Lighting who are experts, and all those people go to Light Fair every year and look at what's available, not just in the country, but in the world.
So they are current.
And so, yeah, they're current, and the lights we picked are made by an Italian company. The bulbs are made by a UK company, Philips. So I'm very fortunate that we have such a strong team of experts that was set up by Bill.
Right. Okay, now the committee then looks at this material, and let's take a look then, if we can, at our third panel.
Okay.
And this sort of illustrates some of the difficult old lights, doesn't it?
Yeah, these are pictures of the old lights that show that people don't like the light trespass. And so in the upper left, you see that's one of the old incandescents with a metal pan. They've bent the edge down so to cut down the light trespass.
Right.
And the one to the right of that is black on the top, and the one on the right is just painted black, and the one on the lower left is painted black on one side, and the one middle bottom has a shade around it. Well, the 2 on the middle right and the lower right have shades around them. So that shows that people don't like the light trespass.
Got it. Got it.
So that's one of the things we want to get rid of with the new lights.
And get rid of the other things.
Yeah.
And let's take a look at our fourth panel, if we can.
Okay. So this, last fall we did 2 things. Let me get to this one in a second. The first thing we did was we did a couple installation plans. There's 240 some lights that National Grid owns that we want to replace. And so with that many lights, we put together a couple installation plans, one by region that started at the amphitheater, worked outward, and then another one by strings, which started at the amphitheater, worked outward. Strings meaning the circuits that National Grid has. There might be some efficiencies to replace them by strings as opposed to just by region. So that kind of gave us an idea of how much it would cost to buy the new lights, have them put in, and what we didn't know at the time was how much National Grid wanted us to pay for the old lights, because early on they wanted, for the Pratt string, they wanted somewhere between $10,000 and $30-some thousand, which is ridiculous, because they're old lights. So we didn't know how much they were going to charge. So after we did the installation plans with how much it would cost to buy the lights, and it roughly is about $400,000 to buy the new lights, and then roughly about $100,000 to put them in, so that's $500,000. So we kind of had a baseline, and then we didn't know how much we were going to pay National Grid for the old one. So this affordability analysis, which is in that chart,
Can we bring that back?
was designed to say, okay, we know some of the costs, we don't know how much we're going to have to pay National Grid. So what we did was, working with Tom Cherry, who's the superintendent of the CUD, he said, well, how about if we look at plans that are, $100,000 a year, which would be about 5 years.
Right.
So, but this, and also said, well, I think we can get it a 20 or 30-year bond at 2%. So this chart basically looks at a 20-year bond, which is the lower curve, at 2% on the left end, 2.5% and 3% on the right end.
Right.
And so, and on the vertical axis, it says, here's what we can afford to pay National Grid without a tax increase. In other words, this project is not like the sewage treatment plant that was just is sunk cost. This has savings involved, and so right now the taxes are $55,000 a year to pay National Grid for the lights. $15,000 of that is for electricity. $40,000 is for leasing and maintenance. So I mentioned the saving in electricity is a quarter, but let's say round it up a little bit, so it'll go from 15 down to say 5 or a little bit less. That's $10,000 savings.
Right.
For $40,000 for the leasing and maintenance, we figured we can go down to 10. I think is a conservative estimate. Could be a lot lower,
Right.
because these lights are long life. They're 15 to 20-year lights, and so there shouldn't be a lot of maintenance involved because they last so long.
Right.
So anyway, so we have potentially about $40,000 savings that we can use to pay for these lights over 20 or 30 years.
Right.
So let's take an example. The lower left-hand point, which would be the lower curve on the left, is a 20-year bond at 2%, and that says we can basically pay National Grid $65,000.
Okay.
Well, they wanted 85 we finally got a draft purchase agreement out of them. They wanted 85,000. Well, so say, well, it doesn't quite make it, but there's been generous people in the institution and on the lighting committee that have promised or donated $40,000 to $50,000. So we can more than make that. So
Right.
without any other costs, that would just do it.
Right.
So, but if you wanted to go longer, if you go straight up on the 2% line, it says we can pay $290,000 for the
Right.
30-year bond is 2%. So then everything below that is no tax increase. So
Right.
what happened was when we went and met with CUD, they said, well, we're concerned about the legal issues, and so they went out and got another lawyer to check in that. But they also said we don't have many extra people to maintain a whole new set of lights. So we thought, well, yeah, okay. Well, here's an option for you, and that is if a 20-year bond will just cover it. But if you have some extra expenses, you got some wiggle room there. You can hire 1 or 2 people,
Right.
which is basically the difference between the lower curve and the upper curve.
Right.
So they were looking at that, and I sent them another kind of detailed paper. The other thing we don't know that's not on here is that in the draft purchase agreement the National Grid sent us in April, they had separation work and reconfiguration work.
Right.
It was not specified how much that was or how much they had to do versus somebody else. So,
Right.
this is kind of the bottom line. Rich Osborne joined us last summer. He's a retired executive from Duke Energy. He's the one that set up this affordability analysis. So thanks for his help, and I kind of took it and made it a lot more complicated to see what the differences would be. But so yeah, that's that's kind of the bottom line on this chart, that we
Right.
know, have a good idea of, how to finance it, how much it's going to cost, with
Right.
a couple details yet to be worked out.
Right. So what's the next step?
The next step is, one of the other things out of the CUD meeting, that they don't have many people, how are we going to, get the public to buy in? And Bill and I said, well, we can help you do the marketing. So this is actually a good opportunity for the public to see, what CPOA has done to help out CUD and the institution. I didn't really talk much about the institution,
Right.
because they've been kind of buying their own lights, and I think we're going to talk, once we get this one squared away, we'll talk more of the institution. We talked to them about, buying the new lights, but, replacing some of their older lights.
Okay.
So we've been talking to John Shedd, and so it's kind of, they're both involved, but different ways they're involved. CUD is going to be the owners and operators of the new lights.
Right.
Chautauqua has their own lights.
Right. Now tell me about the issue of a vote. Where that?
Oh, okay. Any project the CUD undertakes, and the sewage treatment plant was a good example, over $100,000, the property owners have to vote yes or
Right.
no as to whether they want that done. So
Right.
they didn't have much trouble getting the sewage treatment plant financed at $8 million. This is going to be way below $1 million.
Okay.
So-
And so assuming we get the numbers to the point into the summer, I say I'm off the committee, but the numbers are put together where people feel really good about them, and then you would submit it to a vote.
Right.
When would the vote
The
likely
vote
come?
is, well, it's specified as I believe it's the second Tuesday in August.
Okay.
So they haven't given the thumbs up on the vote yet, but they're still checking the legal issues, and but sometime, hopefully in July, we'll get the thumbs up. If we don't, if it doesn't go to a vote, it has to wait for a whole another year,
Right.
including the string in the DOE Gateway Project string on
Right.
Pratt,
Right.
because CUD said we consider that all one project.
Now, the other thing is that this project, if it goes, then would not involve additional taxes. It would have in the long haul a funding benefit, because you're going to have lower utility cost, consumption only about 25% as much power, and furthermore, then the maintenance issue is lower maintenance equipment, and it gets rid of a whole generation of obsolete gear
Right.
that doesn't work very well.
Right.
So it looks like a good move, doesn't it?
Right, and the people that take those Sunday night tours all love the new lights, and there was a survey done a couple years ago that basically 80 some or more percent said the new lights are the way to go.
Good, good. This has been great fun. Is there anything else we need to add? We covered the material pretty well?
Yeah, I think we have. Yeah.
Good. Well,
Yep.
listen, do come back. I've greatly enjoyed it. This is our first production of Chautauqua People for the 2016 season. My name is John Viehe, and my guest has been Dr. John Dilley.